The first time my daughter heard my family laugh at her, she was standing on the terrace in a white dress with one ribbon half undone, humming to herself like the world had not yet taught her shame. It was only a little song she had made up in the car on the way over. Something about silver water and birds that never stayed in one place. Soft, sweet, barely there, but I knew my family too well. In that house, joy had rules, voices had rules, and the people with the most power were always the ones who decided when a child had become a problem. So when Elsie let one line drift out under her breath, I felt the air change before anyone spoke. My brother's mouth tightened. My father lowered his glass. And my mother gave that small, practiced smile she always wore when she wanted something ugly to vanish without ever naming it. My name is Mila Rowan. I'm 32 years old. And by then, I already knew there was one word my family saved for people they could not control. Undisciplined. The Rowan Foundation brunch was being held behind my parents' lake house, under the pergola beside the water. The long table was dressed in pale flowers, polished silver, and the kind of money that liked to call itself generosity. Grant sat near the center, speaking to donors about youth mentorship, as if kindness had been invented for him. My parents stayed close to him, as usual. Elsie and I were seated farther down, close enough to be visible, far enough to be safely unimportant. Near the pergola beam, a man in black adjusted the sound equipment. I noticed the slim microphone overhead and the little red light already live. They were gathering audio for a foundation video. Even lunch had to sound like legacy in that family. Elsie leaned against me and whispered, "Mom, do I have to be super quiet here?" I looked at my brother, then at my father, and I knew that if either of them used that word on her, I would not swallow it this time. I just did not know how much damage one old family word could do before lunch was over. As always, on Revenge Pulse. This is a fictional story created by the channel's author to reflect familiar human wounds and truths. Not any real person. By the time everyone settled at the terrace table, I knew the seating had been decided before I arrived. Grant sat near the center under the pergola, close to my father, close to the donors, close to the kind of attention he had been fed his whole life. Elsie and I were placed near the far end beside a floral arrangement so wide it blocked half the table from view. Not hidden, just managed. My mother leaned down while a server poured water. "Try to keep her quiet today," she said softly, eyes still on the guests. "They're gathering content for the foundation." I looked at Elsie, smoothing the edge of her placemat with both hands. She is quiet. My mother gave me that same practiced smile. Across from Grant, one of the donors laughed. "You can tell he's a natural with young people. Some men just know how to lead." Elsie brightened and lifted a folded drawing from her lap. "I made the lake," she said, offering it to the woman beside her. The woman glanced down, smiled politely, and turned back to Grant before the paper was even open. "That's lovely, sweetheart." Then she asked my brother another question. My father took a sip of tea and chuckled. "Mila used to be just like that. Always interrupting, always in motion. We never knew what she'd knock over next." A few people smiled. He added, "Bright girl, though. Just difficult. There was always some little storm around her. That was how it always worked. If something spilled, cracked, got loud, or went wrong, the family story bent back toward me. Grant was called strong. I was called too much." Noah passed behind us with a case of audio gear. He did not stop, but his eyes flicked toward my father, then toward me. He had heard enough. My phone buzzed in my lap. "Tessa. You okay? Me fine. Just getting through lunch." It was a lie so old it barely felt like one. Elsie leaned against my arm and whispered, "Mom, am I being good?" Something in me tightened at once. because that was the real inheritance in my family. Not the house, not the money, not the foundation name. Teaching a child to wonder if being herself was already a mistake. Brunch had reached that glossy stage where people stopped eating and started performing. Grant was in full form, one hand near his coffee cup, the other making neat little gestures as he spoke about the Foundation's new mentoring campaign. Guidance, structure, safe environments. He used that polished voice of his, the one that made strangers think he had been born kind instead of trained to sound like it. A couple of donors leaned in. My father looked pleased. My mother finally seemed able to breathe. Then Elsie forgot where she was. She was only 6. She had a slice of strawberry in one hand, sunlight on her cheek, and under her breath she started singing that little lake song again. Soft, sweet, barely louder than the silverware, but several heads turned. Grant stopped in the middle of a sentence. I saw the change in him at once. Not surprise, irritation, the kind that came whenever life refused to stay arranged around him. He stood. The whole table seemed to go thinner and quieter with that single movement. He walked toward Elsie and stopped beside her. She looked up at him, still smiling a little, not yet understanding danger in a family like mine. Then his hand closed around her wrist and jerked her arm down. Undisciplined brat. He did not shout it. He said it flatly, like a judgment already earned. Elsie gasped. The strawberry slipped from her fingers and landed on the tablecloth. Joy left her face first. Then came confusion. Then pain. Her eyes flew to mine. I was on my feet so fast my chair scraped hard against the stone. Let her go. Grant kept his grip another second. Someone needs to teach her manners. My father did not move. He gave a short laugh and said, just like her mother when she was young. A few people laughed with him. Not all. Just enough. My mother said, thin and strained, please, not in front of everyone. Not stop. Not this is wrong. Just not in front of everyone. I reached Elsie and pulled her gently toward me. When Grant let go, a red mark was already rising across her wrist. For 1 second, the whole table blurred. Then I looked up and saw the slim microphone beneath the pergola beam, its red light still on. Recording. His hand. His words. My father's words. The laughter after them. In that moment, I understood what they had done. They had taken the oldest humiliation of my life, placed it on my daughter, and served it up between donor smiles and white linen. I lifted Elsie into my arms. No one touches my child like that. Grant's face hardened. You always do this. I correct someone, and you turn it into drama. This is not correction. I did not wait for another word. I turned and walked away with Elsie against my chest. And when I passed the sound table, I saw Noah standing beside the audio board, pale and frozen. He had heard everything. I got Elsie into the small sitting room off the back hall and shut the door with more care than I felt. The moment it latched, she started shaking. Not loud sobs, just small tremors through her shoulders while she stared at her own hand as if it belonged to someone else. I knelt in front of her. You did nothing wrong. Her mouth trembled. Was I bad? That question went through me almost quietly. Because I had heard the same logic my whole life, just in older words. Not that someone had been cruel, not that someone had crossed a line, only that I had been too loud, too emotional, too much. The door opened without a knock. My mother stepped in first. Mila, please, she said softly. Do not make this bigger than it is. I stared at her. Bigger than your son grabbing my child. She flinched at my tone, not my words. My father came in behind her. Grant reacted badly. He said, but this is an important event. He was under pressure. I stood. Do either of you think what just happened was wrong? Neither answered. My mother said, he was trying to maintain order. My father said, children need manners. And there it was. The whole family dictionary. Discipline, tone, order. Words built to protect the wrong people. Something in me went cold. I stopped waiting for them to become the grandparents Elsie deserved. I packed our things, lifted her onto my hip, and walked into the hall. Noah was there with one hand on his equipment case, tense as a wire. The pergola feed was clear, he said quietly. Very clear. I looked at him. If you need the truth, he added, it exists. I nodded, but I did not stop. I carried Elsie to the car and drove straight to urgent care. The doctor examined the red mark, pressed gently along her wrist, and looked up at me with a face that had gone professionally still. I'm documenting this. Tessa opened the door before I knocked, took one look at Elsie in my arms, and stepped back without asking a question. Her apartment smelled like tea and laundry soap, safe things, quiet things. She brought a blanket, a glass of water, and waited until Elsie had curled into the corner of the couch before turning to me. Tell me. So I did. Cleanly. Grant's hand. My father's voice. My mother worrying about appearances while my daughter stood there shaking. Tessa's mouth flattened. This is not just family ugliness. It happened at a public foundation event, around donors, with a child. That matters. Before I could answer. My phone lit up with Grant's name. I let it ring once, then picked up. You always do this, he said. Every important day turns into a mess because you need attention. You grabbed my daughter. I corrected her. You called her a brat. She was disrupting the room. No apology. Not even close. Then my mother called. Please don't destroy your brother's work over one misunderstood moment. A few minutes later, my father left a voicemail, cold and measured. If you take this beyond the family, Mila, you are making a choice, and it will be final. That was the real threat, not what they had done, what I might refuse to bury. By evening, their new version was already moving through the family. Elsie had been loud. I had overreacted. Grant had only guided her hand down. Noah texted just after sunset. Audio file is intact, full feed, nothing altered. Tessa read it over my shoulder. Good. Do not post it. Do not argue with them. Send it only where responsibility lives. At the far end of the couch, Elsie was drawing again. A long table, too many chairs, two tiny figures pressed near the edge. I looked at that picture and felt something settle inside me. This was no longer about peace. I texted Noah back. Send it. When the file came through, I pressed play. Grant's voice came first, then my father's. Then the laughter behind them. Noah came by after dark with his laptop and the same uneasy look he had worn on the terrace. Tessa cleared the dining table. Elsie was asleep in the next room, quiet now in the way children should be when they feel safe, not when they have been shamed into silence. Noah opened the audio file. I thought I was ready because I had lived it. I was not. Grant's voice came first, flat and controlled. Undisciplined brat. Then Elsie's breath caught. On the recording, it sounded even smaller than I remembered that hurt little inhale right before a child understands a room has turned against her. Then my father, just like her mother, when she was young. Calm, familiar, not a joke, a sentence he had probably believed for years. A few people laughed after that, not many. Enough. Then my mother, thin with panic. Please, not in front of everyone. That was when the whole thing changed shape for me. This was not one bad moment. It was a family system speaking in perfect order. Grant hurt my daughter. My father named us both. My mother worried about appearances. and the room made just enough space for laughter. Noah looked sick. The pergola setup was for donor audio, he said quietly. They wanted clean material for the foundation campaign. Children, mentoring, community trust. Tessa let out a hard breath. So while they were recording themselves talking about protecting children, they humiliated one. She moved quickly after that. Audio file, urgent care note, a short written account with no speeches, no pleading, no extra emotion. Just facts, time, place, words, injury. I sent it to the Foundation's safeguarding board, the summit where Grant was scheduled to speak, and the donor liaison listed on the event materials. I did not ask anyone to destroy him. I sent the truth and let it stand on its own. By the next afternoon, Grant's name was gone from the summit poster. By morning, the damage was moving in the quiet ways that hurt families like mine the most. The Foundation opened an internal review and suspended Grant from all public-facing work. The summit removed him from its program. Then a donor's office asked for clarification because they did not want their name attached to any event involving the humiliation of a child. No headlines, no social media storm, just doors closing one by one in rooms that mattered. My father called 3 times before 10, then 5 more. When I finally listened to one voicemail, his voice had changed. The authority was still there, but something frantic kept slipping through. Mila, this has gone too far. Call me back before more harm is done. More harm, as if harm had started when people heard the truth, not when his son put a hand on my child. My mother called next. Come home, she said softly. We can still handle this privately. Privately. That was where they buried things. Grant came to Tessa's door just before dinner. Through the glass, he still looked like a man who believed consequences were for other people. Tessa opened the door halfway. He looked past her at me. You need to retract this, he said. Do you understand what you're destroying? I stood. You destroyed it when you grabbed my daughter. His jaw tightened. It was one moment, one sentence. No, it was a whole table laughing. That hit him harder than anything else I could have said. From the hallway behind me, I heard a small movement. Elsie knew his voice. Tessa stepped forward. You're done here. Any further contact goes through council or the board? She shut the door in his face. That night, the Foundation sent another email. My father had been called into the review too. His words were in the recording. The review was held 2 days later in one of the Foundation's glass conference rooms downtown. The kind built to make money feel like morality. I did not go there to win. I went because my daughter's safety had been turned into a discussion point, and I was not going to let anyone reduce it to tone, misunderstanding, or family strain. Tessa came with me. Noah did not. He had already done the brave part. The board kept my portion short. That suited me. I answered what mattered. Time. Place. What happened? What Elsie asked me afterward? I kept my voice even. Then they played the audio. Grant's voice came first, but the heaviest sound in that room was my father's. Just like her mother when she was young. There it was again. Calm. Certain. A sentence so practiced, it had once sounded normal in my house. In that room, beside my daughter's frightened breath, it sounded like what it had always been. Cruel. No one laughed this time. My father sat across the table in his navy suit, hands folded too neatly. For the first time in my life, I watched him run out of room inside his own certainty. The questions turned quickly after that, not just to Grant's behavior, but to the culture behind it. A donor representative spoke without softness. No one is going to fund a mentoring campaign led by people who mock children. That landed where it needed to land. After the meeting, my mother caught me in the hallway. She looked smaller somehow. I'm sorry, she said. This went too far. I looked at her for a long second. The worst part wasn't what you said about me. It was that my daughter heard it and thought it might be true. She had no answer. An hour later, the board sent a draft decision. Grant would be removed from all representative duties, and my father would lose the right to speak for the foundation at all. The official decision came 3 days later in language so polished it almost hid the wreckage underneath. Almost. Grant was removed from every public-facing role tied to the foundation. No more donor events. No more campaigns. No more speeches under its name. My father stepped down from donor relations and all representative duties. The board also adopted a safeguarding rule for any foundation event involving children. In my family, that counted as an earthquake. My mother was not named in any formal consequence. That fit her too well. She had spent years surviving by standing half a step away from the worst thing in the room and pretending that distance made her innocent. Grant texted me that night, "Hope you're happy. You finally got what you wanted." I read it once and locked my phone. He still thought this had been about winning something from him. My father called the next evening, not with orders, not even with anger, just a tired kind of blame. "You've made this family look ashamed of itself." I stood at Tessa's kitchen window and watched rain drag down the glass. "No," I said. Singing at brunch was never the shame. He said nothing. The shame was a grown man calling a little girl that name while everyone else laughed. I ended the call before he could drag me back into the old language. I did not go home. I did not ask for repair. I did not need another invitation to that table just so they could decide where to seat me. I only needed one thing now, for Elsie to grow up without mistaking herself for the problem. A few weeks later, while we were setting up folding chairs in a borrowed community room, she looked up at me and asked softly, "Can I sing at the new place when you're ready?" A month later, the room we borrowed at the community center had metal chairs, a coffee stain near the back wall, and a paper sign taped crookedly to the door. It was perfect. No donors, no speeches, no family name pretending to mean kindness. Just a small Saturday music hour for children who needed a room where joy would not be corrected. Tessa handled check-in with a clipboard. Noah came early to set up the sound system and brushed off every attempt I made to thank him. "It's just a mic," he said. But it wasn't. Elsie stood beside me in a blue cardigan, her fingers tucked into mine, watching the room fill with parents, grandparents, and restless little bodies who had not yet learned to apologize for existing. She tipped her head toward me. "Can I do the lake song?" My heart tightened for a second. Then I looked around. No one here wanted her smaller. "Yes," I said. "You can..." She walked to the front with that careful 6-year-old courage that still breaks me a little just to see. Noah lowered the microphone stand. Tessa gave her a thumbs up from the back. Then Elsie sang. The same little song about silver water and birds and boats with names only she knew. No one stopped her. No one flinched. And when she finished, the room filled with applause. Not the laughter of adults enjoying someone else's smallness. The honest kind. The kind that comes when people have actually listened. That was when I understood what winning was. Not going back to the old table. Not being invited back. Building a new room where my daughter did not have to disappear to be loved. Afterward. A volunteer handed me an envelope left at the front desk. Inside was a copy of the Foundation's new safeguarding policy. One sentence had been underlined in blue ink. All children attending Foundation events are entitled to dignity, protection, and respectful treatment at all times. I smiled, but not because of them. Because something that had followed me since childhood had finally lost its right to reach my daughter. Elsie was never undisciplined. Neither was I. We had simply been standing in the wrong room.